Right, good evening everybody. Now I've managed to navigate the road closures in order to get here. Apologies for the slight delay. Welcome to the Cabinet meeting. Fire alarm procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, vacate the offices via the stairs. Please do not use the lifts. Assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Please switch off or turn to silent your mobile phones. Do not make or receive calls while the meeting is in progress. Please note this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and subsequently available on the internet. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? No. Following members have asked to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1. Item 5, Councillor Cupp. Item 6, Councillor Austin. Item 7, Councillors Austin, Wright and Cupp. Item 8, Councillor Austin. Item 11, Councillor Davis. Item 12, Councillors Pugh, Austin and Cupp. And item 13, Councillor Bayford. Do we have any more requests for speaking under 20.1? Excellent. Apologies. We've had apologies from... It is really one of those days, isn't it? We've had apologies from Councillor Duckworth and Councillor Whitehead. So I don't think there can be any more apologies. I know we've got a number of officers who would normally be here who are not here this evening. It is August. It's not surprising. And the same goes for Cabinet members. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have an interest to declare in the items of business on the agenda this evening? No. Minutes of the previous meetings. Previous meetings held on the 25th of June. Copy of the minutes is attached. I propose we take those minutes as read. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bright, thank you. Members agree? Thank you. Minutes of the extraordinary meeting on the 22nd of July. Ditto. Propose we take those minutes as read. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Bright. Members agree. Thank you. The first substantive item will be the annual Treasury Management Review 2025-26. Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. And apologies, we won't be whizzing through this one. So, Cabinet members, I'm presenting the annual Treasury Management Review for 2025-26. And the report sets out our year-end position for capital financing, borrowing levels and investment performance, and it confirms our full compliance with SIPFA guidelines and statutory prudential indicators. So there's a few bits from the report that I just want to pick out. Looking at capital expenditure and financial outturn, our total capital expenditures on long-term assets for the year reached 59 million, which was split of 29.8 million in the general fund and 29.2 million in the housing fund. And that was delivered against a total capital budget of 159.6 million. That leaves 100.6 million slippage, which is mainly across the major regeneration and housing schemes, and officers are actively working to look at that as part of our refreshed capital strategy. Second area I want to look at is our borrowing position and prudent under borrowing. So our gross external debt increased to 80.9 million. That was up from 37.1 million and was mainly due to us taking out some key public works loan board loans during the year to support the housing revenue account and general fund capital delivery. Our capital financing requirement, so our underlying need to borrow, was left at 92.2 million, which meant that we still had an overall under-borrowed position of about 11.3 million. And by using our internal cash reserves rather than taking on expensive borrowing during these high interest periods, we've managed to minimise those borrowing costs, which is good. Looking at statutory prudential compliance, our maximum gross borrowing of 80.9 million remained well below our statutory authorised limit of 149.5 million and our operational boundary of 144.5 million. And we fully complied with the requirement that gross debt must not exceed the total CFR, and ensuring external borrowing was undertaken purely for capital investment, never for revenue support. There's some nuances within that, but we have held on to that. In terms of our Treasury investments and returns, as of the 31st of March this year, investment balances stood at 32.7 million, and we achieved a return of 4.11%, which was above the 7-day SONIA benchmark of 4.02%. And our total investment income reached 1.515 million, which outperformed our original budget estimate of 1.435 million. So credit to officers for the excellent job we've been doing over this year in terms of borrowing. And from a capital receipts perspective, net capital receipts saw a marked increase to 4.1 million, which was driven mainly by right-to-buy sales, the disposal of some of the high-cost housing stock, and the recommencement of general fund property asset sales. I know there's been a lot of conversation at Cabinet around some of the properties that have been put up for various disposals, but that figure shows sort of the work that's been put into that by officers and the council alike is bearing fruit. And in summary, our treasury management strategy has remained robust, prudent and compliant. It's protected the council from unnecessary borrowing costs while maximising investment yields in a volatile interest rate environment, and I will recommend it to Cabinet.
So just to be clear, Councillor Scobie, you're moving the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you. Have a seconder, please. Councillor Bright, and speaking under 20.1, Councillor Cupp.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Scobie. I appreciate that capital projects do slip, and there can be perfectly legitimate reasons for that. Last year, we had a capital programme of almost 160 million and delivered just under 59 million. And this wasn't confined to one part of the council. Both the General Fund and the HRA delivered only 37% of their respective capital budgets. The report itself describes the level of slippage as significant. We are now into another financial year, and officers have already said that the capital programme is having to be reprofiled to reflect more realistic spending timelines. So, what has the administration actually changed in the way projects are assessed and put into the capital programme, and what assurance can the Cabinet give us that this year's programme is genuinely deliverable rather than simply another ambitious set of figures that will be pushed into future years? Thank you.
Councillor Scobie.
So I want to make a couple of broad points, and I think that it's probably fair to bring officers in because it's quite a technical area. So, and a lot of this will be related to major projects and when they have to be accounted for. So some of the slippage looks like it's large amounts of money moving, but it's just the way that these have to be accounted for. So I think there's two major parts to this which I think we need to cover. The first bit is the regeneration projects, which every councillor knows this money came in very, very quickly. Some of it we weren't even expecting, and we've had to quickly pull together substantial regeneration projects, and we're having to move at pace. So I think it's fair to say that I don't think there's much more officers could do to move forward some of those projects. We are all eagerly anticipating some of the large projects moving, and I think we've got really good progress happening on them. But it is a risk. It's one that we're well aware of. It sits on our risk register. It's something that we talk about, you know, the potential that some of these projects could slip and what that would mean for us. But I think in terms of your question as to why those monies are moving, that would be a large part of it. And I think the second one relates to the investments we've made in our housing stock to try and deal with temporary accommodation, which again was a fast-moving issue. That was a risk that, you know, was significantly impacting the general fund, and we had to move quickly to deal with that. It's an ambitious program. I think we're starting to see the fruits of that investment that we've made. You can see that in the temporary accommodation numbers coming down, and the fact that when we're looking at next year's budget, even though I would say we're still nervous about the housing numbers, we feel like it's one of the risks that financially was facing the council over the last couple of years, that the controls we put in are bearing fruit. So I accept what you're saying is fair. There have been major sort of movements in the capital programme, but I think in fairness to officers, I think with the cards they've been dealt, they've done a really, really good job. But I don't know if Chris or Matt wants to come in to add any more details to that from the accounting perspective.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. You've actually covered the technical aspects of it really, really well. What I would say from a practical perspective is probably mostly centred on the work of our project delivery board that we've got in place now, that there's several sort of gatekeeping points that projects have to go through now before we sort of commit to spend or progress projects at different stages. And that has allowed us, I'd say, to have a much more robust idea and estimate of the phasing of projects. So, for example, previously, projects would go into the capital programme. We still, in some instances, have holding positions. So if you look at the current capital programme, we've got a holding sort of budget in there for the likes of Jackie Baker's. But it won't be until it's been through several stages of the project delivery framework and through those gatekeeping points that we'll have a better idea of what the profile of the spend looks like, and we'll have a much better idea of what the shape of the capital programme should look. But as Councillor Scobie said, the big ticket items in the programme really are around temporary accommodation, regen on the general fund side, and they're difficult to predict due to the nature of those schemes, and then on the large HRA programmes as well. But I'm confident Matt and his team have done a really robust piece of work. We'll continue again to do it later this year when we're looking at what we think slippage might be and what we're actually going to commit into next year's budget. So we'll be going through another round of it. But I think it's fair comment to say that we have had significant slippage, as the report says, in previous years, and it's something that we're actively trying to focus on to tighten up going forwards.
Thank you. I think probably in respect to the HRA, it's also worth mentioning the delays to the Towerbrook programme, which have not really been caused by the council, they've been caused by the building safety regulator. So I'm not sure what more we could have done really in order to address those. Members, any comments? No? Okay, thank you. That's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? And we move on to the update on notice of motion to address violence against women and girls in Thanet. First of many items for Councillor Keane.
Thank you. This report outlines the progress made with regard to the notice of motion to address violence against women and girls, or VORG, in Thanet, which Cabinet considered in June 2025. The motion shone a light on the topic and enabled us to review the work underway and look at what more we needed to do. There has been some improvement in statistics for Thanet, but we are determined to keep building on this. Cabinet agreed to 7 specific recommendations from the motion to improve safety and equality for women and girls across our district. This report fulfills the commitment to report back on our progress. It outlines the work undertaken by the Council and the Thanet Community Safety Partnership, which includes multiple education initiatives, including a focus on empowering girls and young women, whilst also working with boys and young men to tackle some of the negative influences they may encounter, and digital online safety for all. Ensuring that the Hackney carriage and private hire policy standards for licence holders, including safeguarding training and DBS, are maintained. Creating a specific women and girls safety charter for the Jackie Bakers development, which can then be rolled out more widely. Building on the Gym Safe initiative and many others detailed in the report. Whilst we have seen some positive trends, such as a decrease in reported incidents from previous assessment data, this report highlights the ongoing challenges we face and underscores our continued dedication to tackling the root causes of VORG, ensuring our district is a safe place for all. And Cabinet is asked to note the report prior to it being reported to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. Can I have a seconder, please? I'll let Councillor Alban second that one. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Keane. It's good to see the progress on this, and thanks again to Councillor Bright for bringing the original motion. It was very welcome and much supported by our group. I'm interested in knowing about the link with Jackie Bakers, how that's happening, how the strategy is developing in relation to that, and I'm concerned by the issues that you highlight in the report around the normalisation of misogyny, which we've seen extensively in political circles as well. We have a political party represented in this chamber that, where the leader of which thinks that Andrew Tate is a role model for young men. That there are some real concerns there that's affecting the behaviour of young men to a worrying degree, and I'm really pleased to see that there's something happening about that as far as plans for the community safety team are concerned. And obviously, as a Ramsgate councillor, we've just seen a violent incident that resulted in a death in Ramsgate. It didn't involve women and girls on this occasion, but it could just as easily have done so. The normalisation of knife crime seems to be an increasing worry. So if you could answer about the link with Jackie Bakers in particular, I'd be interested in that. Thank you very much.
Councillor Keane.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Austin. With Jackie Baker's, what we're doing is working as a multi-agency group to bring together a charter which covers all the issues that women and girls face when they're accessing activities. And we're using live experience. We're, for example, talking to the Youth Council so that we get the actual lived experience, because sometimes it's really quite simple things. Sometimes it's very practical measures like the lighting in a place, but it's also about the welcome people get and just feeling they belong and not being pushed out by sort of over ebullient boys or things like that, particularly in a football focused area. And so once we've done that work and created the charter, then it'll be very easy to make sure that all sporting activities follow the same sort of guidance. So whereas it's not completed yet, I'm very sort of hopeful that this will really be a very positive move for girls and women to access all sports safely and in a way that's right for them. In terms of the normalisation of misogyny, it is a very worrying thing, and certainly there's already work going on with boys through the education programmes in schools to really look at the kind of things that they pick up and to challenge their beliefs and set it out in a different way. But I also think this is an area that we want to continue to develop work on, and I think it's very important that we do. And for both boys and girls, young men and young women, we need to look at online safety to create a better environment for them, because they get a lot of information and views on there.
Members. Councillor Alban.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to follow on from Councillor Keane, as the Cabinet member responsible for Jackie Baker's process, one of the other main parts of it is that we're working very closely with the adjoining school, which is a mixed school, and it's clear because obviously what we're doing is to get the running track etc. in with Jackie Baker's, and so working with the school is it's opened our eyes up a little, and certainly one of my priorities for it was the matter of violence against women and girls, so that we could give safe places and design safe places. And as Councillor Keane, that person, as she said, the part of making sure that the girls and women, not just the young girls who will be there, but the women feel safe in the environment there, and that's a very important part of getting this project dealt with and done. Thank you.
Councillor Bright.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Keane and officers, for this report. It's really encouraging. In this report, the most recent statistics state that there were 3,371 reported incidents of VORG in Thanet in recent times. There were also 5,586 reported incidences of domestic abuse in the district. Given that the domestic abuse charity Refuge state that fewer than 24% of DA cases are even reported, it's highly likely that at least 20,000 women and girls in Thanet are affected by some degree of VORG every year. 20,000 women and girls. That underscores the importance of this vital work to our council. I know that Councillor Joanne Bright joins me in welcoming the work that's already being done in response to her initial motion across this council. And I'm particularly pleased to hear from Councillor Keane that the Women's Safety Charter in development at Jackie Baker's is being rolled out to our other parks and open spaces. It's a brilliant initiative. It's particularly important given the regular levels of harassment experienced by women and girls in our town. And at this point, I will remind everyone that there are certain councillors who work with the Free Speech Union to deny us what would have been a useful tool to combat harassment within our PSPO across the district. Moving on, you can say that it's rubbish, but it's true, Councillor Davis. Moving on,
Can you be quiet, please, Councillor Davis?
I'm really interested, Councillor Davis, that you mentioned that this is waffle. I am talking about violence against women and girls in our district. And the fact that you are speaking over me speaks a lot to your respect of that matter. Moving on, I know that given our role as a council, we can only do what we can, but the broader worry is that our efforts are having to largely focus on mitigation rather than the cause, which is ultimately, and I'll remember this, I'd like everyone to remember that ultimately this is down to men and boys. I'm therefore really pleased to see the initiatives around education on healthy relationships and toxic masculinity, which includes probably speaking over people when they are speaking, and urge officers to prioritise these in the coming months.
Thank you, Councillor Bright. Anybody else? So I'd like to welcome the report and also say I think it's been a useful exercise to bring an update back to Cabinet and back to Council, and I'm sure we can have a further debate about this at Council. I just want to say something about the perception that the Jackie Baker scheme's about football, because Councillor Keane mentioned that. I think she knows otherwise because she's been part of the working group meetings that we've had around it. But the scheme does include tennis courts and paddle courts. It obviously involves the athletics track, which involves women and girls. But also it's about a better facility for the community. And we very much see the pavilion that's part of the scheme as a social centre for people in that area in Northwood and Newington. And obviously it's vital that women and girls have the confidence to access that area and use those facilities. So it's very much making it about an accessible space for everybody. I will slightly make the political point. Councillor Austin referred to representation in this chamber from another party. I don't see them. And frankly, quite often when I come to meetings, I don't see them. So they may be elected to be here, but they're not represented tonight, and I don't remember them coming to a Cabinet meeting. Perhaps members' experience is other than that, but I wouldn't call them representatives personally. Members, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. And we move back to Councillor Keane for consultation on the PSPO dog control, which I don't think interests the Free Speech Union, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. So, the existing public space protection order in relation to dog control is coming to the end of its 3-year life. Officers are therefore requesting permission to go out to consultation on the Public Spaces Protection Order Dog Control 2026. This order is essential to replace the existing 2023 agreement, which has been highly effective in maintaining the standards of our beaches and parks. Its renewal supports our core corporate priorities of keeping our district safe and clean and protecting our environment. The proposed PSPO continues the proven traffic light system, which has successfully balanced the needs of dog owners with the wider community while reducing antisocial behaviour. Crucially, this draft introduces new evidence-based measures for the area between Cold Harbour and Plum Pudding, which is Minnis Bay and the district boundary towards Reculver. Following analysis from Birdwise East Kent, we are proposing year-round dog exclusions on the beach and a dogs on lead requirement on the northern sea wall to mitigate significant wildlife disturbance. By approving this consultation, we will fulfil our statutory requirements under the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act 2014 and ensure that our approach remains both informed and effective before bringing a final recommendation back to you. Cabinet is requested to consider the evidence base detailed in the statements attached to this report for a proposed PSPO in the terms set out at Annex 1 of the report. Agree to consult on the proposed PSPO in accordance with the statutory requirements, and note that the intention is for the proposed PSPO to replace the PSPO that was agreed by Cabinet on the 20th of October 2023.
Thank you, Councillor King. Have a seconder, please. Councillor Alvin, speaking under 20.1. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Keane. Just to say that this seems very sensible. We're fully supportive of anything that improves the environment and improves the state of our beaches because they are crucial to our both our residents and visitors. And to ask about how PSPOs can be amended once they are in place. And this is probably a cheeky question because I'm thinking most particularly about the area of coverage of the alcohol PSPO in Ramsgate, but it would equally apply to this one. What flexibility do we have? Do we have to go right back to consultation again if something is approved for a particular area and then it's changed, or are there flexibilities in there? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. I was particularly pleased with this PSPO that it had taken on board the advice from Birdwise and reacted and responded to that, but obviously that's in the cycle of renewing the PSPO. I think it might be fixed under those terms. I'm not sure what the process would be to bringing it back, so I'll refer to officers for that.
I think the monitoring officer is going to.
Okay.
Yeah, it's you can't just amend it. It's a further period of evidence gathering and a further period of consultation, and so you have to go through the whole decision-making process. There's no shortcut, unfortunately.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. I also welcome this PSPO. The only thing I would say is I think you may have missed an opportunity to include keeping dogs on lead on the promenades. During the summer, when loose dogs are running around the prom, it's not very nice. Sometimes the smaller dogs are not too bad, but the big dogs do cause some concern. So I think it would be appropriate that all dogs should be on a lead at all times around the promenades. Thank you.
Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. I think what we've really tried to do is balance the needs of all beach users. We want our beaches and promenades to be welcoming for everybody, and so there has to be areas that, you know, sort of are easier for dog walkers to use than others. So I feel this is a balanced thing. I think the other good thing is, of course, that because there is a consultation, people have the right to give their views on it. And so if particular messages are coming through, then maybe that's something we look at.
Thank you. Councillor Cutt.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Keane. I fully support this proposal. The evidence about the importance of this coastline for breeding and wintering birds is very strong, and if restrictions restricting access, in particular to areas, helps protect that wildlife, I think absolutely we should go ahead and do this. The part I would like a little bit more clarity on is enforcement. The report refers to targeted patrols by beach rangers, the dog warden service and others, but doesn't really say how regularly we would expect that to happen or what it will look like outside of the main summer season. Could it be explained further how the new restrictions will actually be managed and enforced, particularly throughout the year, whether there is sufficient capacity within the existing resources to patrol the area, and also how will we measure whether the new arrangements are actually reducing the disturbance to the birds? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cupp. Yes, some very good points there. I think that we do the best we can in enforcing the PSPO, but I think it's really important to remember that the main purpose of the PSPO is not to fine people, it's to educate people. And so sort of we might not see lots of fines, but if people are getting the messages about, you know, needing to keep dogs off the beaches or under control, then that's really the aim of what we're doing. And I think in terms of you know, the birds and that, we've listened to the evidence that's been presented to us, and we will continue to do that. So if new evidence comes up, then we will need to respond to that. So it's really just keeping that open dialogue going. I mean, we'd obviously love more people to be able to enforce the PSPO, but we know we have finite resources and it's about using them as best we can. The other thing that can and does happen is that if people are reporting particular problems in a particular beach or area like that, then obviously we can target the enforcement to those particular areas.
Thank you. Members, any comments about the dogs PSPO? Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. And we can move on to the long-awaited Tackling Poverty Strategy with Councillor Keane.
Okay, so as we are aware, Thanet faces significant socio-economic challenges, with the 2025 indices of deprivation ranking our wards within the bottom 10% of the most deprived districts in England. We are seeing the real-world impact of these statistics, with 26.3% of our children in low-income families and 14% of our households experiencing fuel poverty. This report presents a crucial step in how the Council respond to these challenges. We are working towards a whole systems approach. By adopting this strategy, we will create a single strategic point of reference which allows us to integrate our poverty reduction efforts systematically rather than in silos. Establish the Tackling Poverty Strategy Network. This body will coordinate our internal work with district-wide efforts and external partners, ensuring we are better aligned with the Kent-Marmot Coastal Region framework. Embed health equity into council policy. The strategy ensures that we consider socio-economic inequalities as a core component of all council functions, aligned with the Health in All Policies approach. This strategy is about ensuring that we are taking proactive, preventative action to address the causes of the causes, the conditions in which our residents are born, grow, live and work. I therefore ask Cabinet to approve the adoption of the Tackling Poverty Strategy 2026, agree that the provisions of the Tackling Poverty Strategy be incorporated into other council policies, including Health in All Policies as appropriate, and notes the establishment of the Tackling Poverty Strategy Network to coordinate Thanet projects with district-wide efforts to alleviate and prevent poverty.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Alban. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Keane. Really, really welcome this document. It's excellent to see it coming forward finally. It's taken a lot of work, and officers are to be congratulated for their efforts in this. It's very, very encouraging, and the way it dovetails with the Health in All strategy and so on, the focus on health, the focus on partnership, the focus on the environmental and housing aspects of health and of poverty are extremely welcome. I think our only concern is the lack of focus on jobs and training, because that is a crucial component of the financial well-being of residents, and there seems to be a bit of a gap there. And I did say this at scrutiny, and indeed I commented at scrutiny when we were looking at the update of the corporate plan on the fact that we were looking at 256 jobs in total created directly and indirectly through our regeneration projects between now and 2038, which is 22 jobs a year, which is pathetic, quite frankly, in the greater scheme of things, particularly in view of the fact that many of our regeneration projects in the past have not allowed us to the freedom that we wanted to do things that would have been beneficial because they were tied to job outcomes. So I think there's some work to be done there. Perhaps not as part of this strategy, but as a health-focused strategy, it's brilliant. As a complete tackling poverty strategy, I think there's a gap. And it would be really good to see some more happening on the jobs and training side, particularly as our first priority in the local plan is create additional employment and training opportunities. It's something that it really affects people in Thanet, and we need to be working with our partners in the same way that we're going to work on the health aspects on those things as well, in our view. Thank you.
Can I just intervene on that, Councillor Austin? Yeah, I hear your point, and I think we're aware of it. We don't have anybody, we don't have the portfolio holder for regeneration, we don't have Ms Askew here this evening, we don't have Mr Porter here this evening. What I will say to you is that adjustment to the corporate priorities, which will go to Council for agreement, is based on a government decision. It's not a figure that we've set out or a timescale that we've decided upon. So what we've done is we've adjusted the priorities to reflect the information that we've got from government. It doesn't reflect our aspiration in terms of creating jobs. So it's a technical thing, and I don't think we should get carried away with thinking that's the council's aspiration. That's related to the regeneration projects, and I'm sure you will have plenty of opportunity to discuss that with Ms Askew and others at future meetings. But I just want to be clear about that. Sorry, Councillor King, do you want to come in?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Austin. I mean, I agree that sort of jobs and training and employment are a really vital thing that we need in Thanet, because we know how poorly served we are and our young people are served with opportunities here. And it is something we are building on. One of the things that I think is really good that this strategy links in with the Kent Marmot Coastal Regeneration Framework, and one of the goals there is particularly about creating opportunities job-wise and that. And I know there's already been some work in Ramsgate by the Regeneration Board there to look at doing just that. I think the other good thing to remember about this whole policy is obviously it's just coming forward, it's at an early stage, and it's a really big document and a really big policy, and it will be growing and changing over time. So, you know, I think we all support jobs and training, particularly for our young people, and I really hope that this is at least one mechanism that we can start to bring that forward in that way. I'd like to just ask if officers have anything to add to that.
Just to mention that the Tackling Poverty Strategy Network, the intention is to have a strategic lead from DWP there as well. So jobs does feature in that. Yeah, and yeah, just to echo the comments you made about Ramsgate and work that's ongoing as well. So yeah, thank you.
Members. Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. What I like about this strategy is it's bold and it's forward-looking. And I just wanted to make one particular point. As an officer working for Thanet District Council, from the early 1990s, dealing with multiple occupancies and seeing the deprivation that was across Thanet, not just Ramsgate or Cliftonville West, but was across Thanet, and there's been no change. And so this, I'm hoping, this strategy can be broadened, can be opened, and can be pushed forward so that we can try and make a difference. Thank you.
Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, I think I agree with the comments that have been made, and I just wanted to say I think the timing of this is really good with local government reorganisation, because Thanet has a particular profile, and it's important that that is not lost in the wider authority we're going to go into. We have communities that have particular needs and which are very different to parts of Dover and parts of Canterbury, so having something like here that calls it out and pulls that information together is really important. And just as a sort of personal comment, I grew up on the road that literally divided Cliftonville West and Cliftonville East. It run down the back of our garden, and just the idea that there is a life expectancy difference between one side of that road to the other of 9 years is quite shocking. And I just think pulling those points together is really good, so I really commend it and all the work that's taken place.
Councillor Bright.
Yeah, that is really shocking, and I think Councillor King can be rightly proud, and officers can be rightly proud of this. I mean, it's been a tough summer, hasn't it? And I think this report has kind of reminded me personally of why I do this. You know, the fact that we've got our life expectancy since 2010 in Thanet has not only just stopped going up, but that it's actually going down. I think that shines a light on what's happened to communities up and down the country like ours since 2010, and it just can't be tolerated, and I'm really glad that we're not, and neither should it be tolerated that 26% of children in Thanet live in poverty and 17% of our young people are leaving school without any qualifications. So it's an economic factor as well as an ethics factor, because poverty costs the economy, it costs the NHS, it costs all of these things, and it's incredibly damaging when poverty is kind of digging its claws in. And I think it's brilliant that we are part of this sort of pathfinder strategy. So really proud of that as well. And I think there is optimism, as Councillor Scobie rightly says. Local government reorganisation is going to give us an opportunity, and I'd like to see this adopted by Canterbury and Dover and Deal as well, as they join with us, because this is a great strategy to tackle the things, and we've got so many sectors that are growing. So yeah, I'm sure this will really succeed, and I'm proud to support it.
Okay. Do you want to come in?
I just wanted to say that Anthony March at DWP has actually been really helpful in developing this strategy and working on the statistics. And one of the huge projects that the UK Shared Prosperity Fund has been part of is that we've got the first youth skills employment hub in Thanet, and it's the first one in Kent that they're trialling. And they've got lots of multiple partners in there, and it is something that's started within the last few months, but it's an initiative with the DWP that's focused on youth, because it's our youth unemployment that's actually one of the scariest statistics in Kent.
And if I could just add, although Councillor Scobie alluded to Canterbury as perhaps not having the same level of poverty that we have in Thanet, there has been a lot of good work done in Canterbury. I think you're probably aware of and some academics at the University of Kent who are involved in a study of poverty in East Kent, very keen to be active in Thanet. I know this was alluded to at Overview and Scrutiny, but their response, they've given a very, very positive response to this strategy from the Council, which I think is encouraging and gives it a validation, because they're coming from a completely different perspective, and we're going to be talking to them and hearing what they've got to say about what more we could do as well, because they've got some great ideas and some great input. So I think East Kent is coming together around that. And I think that the work that's been done in Canterbury we can learn from as well. Members, that's been moved and seconded. If there's no more discussion, are we agreed? Thank you. You're not off the hook yet, Councillor Keane, because it's time for health in all policies.
Thank you.
You were a marathon runner.
This report seeks Cabinet approval for the Health in All Policies, or HIAP strategy, which establishes a framework for embedding health considerations into all council decision-making processes to improve long-term health outcomes and reduce health inequalities across the district. The Health and Social Care Act 2012 introduced a legal duty to upper-tier authorities to take steps to improve the health of their local populations. Given the importance of improving health inequalities within Thanet, officers felt it was important to consolidate the work undertaken across council departments and introduce health as a criteria for consideration in all council reports. Cabinet is requested to approve the adoption and implementation of the Health in All Policies 2026 policy and agree that the provision of the HIAP be incorporated into other council strategies as appropriate, and support the continued cross-service and partnership approach to improving health and reducing health inequalities in the district, and note Thanet's status as an anchor organisation within the Kent-Marmot coastal region. And I would just like to say I'm also really pleased that the poverty strategy, or tackling poverty strategy, and this has come together, because I think they interlink so much, and with work in both these areas it's going to be really strong, hopefully, in creating better conditions in Thanet for our residents.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. You're moving the recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Scobie. Any further comment, members? Super. Thank you. You're off the hook now, Councillor Keane. Now, is that agreed, members? Thank you. As we know, Councillor White couldn't be with us this evening, but you'll be pleased to hear that she sent her comments in relation to the tenancy strategy and tenant management policy, and I have the privilege of reading them to you. This report asks for Cabinet to make a decision on whether to approve the tenancy strategy and tenants management policy for adoption and publication. Both policies require regular updates to remain compliant with national legislation and to reflect local housing needs. The two policy documents are intrinsically linked but have distinct purposes. The tenancy strategy is a mandatory document that provides guidance to other registered providers for social housing who operate in the district regarding their tenancy management policies and other such policies and guidelines that affect their tenants. Effectively, it sees the council acting as the lead organisation in the district in setting the agenda and aspirations for how local social housing is managed, such as through sensible rent setting. The council's tenant management policy is our own policy for our own tenants. This policy outlines how tenancies are managed, how tenancies are ended, and the criteria for tenancy succession, plus any flexibility that is available on those points. This policy and strategy came before the Overview and Scrutiny Panel and Cabinet in April 2025 to approve them both to go out for a 6-week period of public consultation. During the consultation, the documents and associated questions were shared with council tenants, Thanet residents and other key stakeholders who were invited to share their views. The Housing Strategy team worked with Communications and the Tenant and Leaseholder Service to publicise the consultation, but participation was lower than expected. We will be working in future to see how this rate can be increased and looking at further potential engagement. Only minor amendments have been made since the closure of the consultation, as no significant concerns were raised. The vast majority of the policy has been written in order to satisfy and align with the requirements of national legislation and the Regulator of Social Housing's tenancy standard. The Council, as a responsible social landlord, must ensure compliance with the regulator across all the required outcomes. At Overview and Scrutiny Panel, 2 recommendations were made to Cabinet as outlined in the report. The first recommendation was regarding other means by which engagement could be encouraged other than through a formal consultation. As discussed earlier, we are proposing that we will consider additional communications channels, including targeted newsletters, targeted leaflet drops, targeted social media, and potentially setting up in-person events to gather feedback in a more informal and conversational setting. Officers will also investigate the possibility of incentives where budgetary restraints allow. The second recommendation asks for officers to consider flexibility to enable sole tenancies to convert to joint tenancies. There are significant safety and safeguarding issues around this proposal, and officers sought formal legal advice on this point, which stated that the issuing of a new joint tenancy would trigger the several operational risks, as well as significant safeguarding risks to tenants, including the fact that it would convert active rent arrears into former tenant debts, the fact it would invalidate existing notice periods, court orders or breach proceedings, the increased risk it presents to vulnerable tenants being coerced into a tenancy change when marital law already provides sufficient safeguards, the increased risk for tenancy fraud, as set out in the report, where applicants could potentially bypass the housing register. Our number one priority as a council and as a social landlord is to keep our residents safe. Many of our residents and those on our housing register could be classed as vulnerable, and their protection is paramount. Entirely aside from our moral and legal responsibilities, our continuing focus on the eradication of domestic violence, abuse and coercive control is equally relevant here, with our legal advice stating that a policy that permits conversion to joint tenancies on request could expose vulnerable sole tenants to pressure from abusive partners to share the tenancy, thereby gaining security of tenure and making it more difficult for the victim to escape the abusive relationship. Thanet District Council, as a housing provider, has a legitimate interest in guarding against such risks in their tenancy management policies. Therefore, the report rejects these suggestions, as we do not agree that a change to the policy is appropriate considering these substantial risks. It is our responsibility to keep our tenants safe and ensure that their tenancies are secure and that they are safeguarded in their tenancies and their homes. So the full legal advice can be found in the report. And Councillor Whitehead says, thanks as always to our stellar tenant and leaseholder group for their work on our policies and to all officers involved in bringing these policies forward. I move the recommendations set out in the report. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Keane. Speaking under 20.1, nobody. Members. Councillor Scobie.
I don't have anything to comment on the report itself other than just to say we've obviously had quite a lot in the news in the last couple of weeks with people's various policies around social housing and allocations, and it's just very refreshing to read a document that's well thought out, based in the law, and isn't overtly trying to divide communities against each other. It's actually reflecting the needs of the community. So just a comment, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And we can move on to the approval of the vessel policy report, which is also me. This report recommends the approval of a new vessel disposal policy for the Port of Ramsgate. The port currently manages up to 700 berths. While the vast majority of boat owners pay their fees promptly, the Council occasionally faces situations where harbour and berthing dues remain unpaid for extended periods. When this occurs, effective procedures must be in place to recover debts and deal with non-paying or abandoned vessels. Under existing arrangements, the Council relies on general disposal procedures to seize and auction vessels with unpaid dues. In practice, this process has proven inefficient. Seized vessels are frequently sold at public auctions for nominal prices to buyers who lack the means or understanding to maintain them. As a result, these vessels are often re-abandoned in our harbour, leaving the Council stuck in an expensive and repetitive cycle of debt recovery. The vessel disposal policy proposed in this report introduces a clearer, legally robust procedure specifically tailored for maritime enforcement. By utilising sections 44 and 45 of the Harbour Docks and Piers Clauses Act 1847, the Council will have a direct legal basis to distrain, or seize, and sell non-paying vessels at their fair market value. The proposed change will deliver two key benefits. Firstly, it will maximise the money recovered to offset unpaid dues by securing market value for sold vessels, and secondly, selling at market rate will help to ensure that vessels pass to responsible owners, breaking the cycle of repeated abandonment. Adopting this policy has no direct cost implications for the Council's budget. Instead, it strengthens the Council's ability to recover the debt effectively. In summary, the policy provides a modern, fair and legal framework for the recovery of debts relating to unpaid vessel dues. Finally, I'd like to point out that the effective date mentioned in the recommendations section of the report should read 7th of September 2026 rather than the 2nd of August 2025. I move that Cabinet adopts the vessel disposal policy set out in Annex 1 with an effective date for the start of this policy of Monday the 7th of September 2026. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Keane, thank you. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to congratulate you on picking up that little point, because that was one of the points that we were going to be making. I'd like to welcome this initiative because there's it's certainly most important that we don't have the debacle that was going on in the past, where people found it more cost effective to mount massive arrears of harbour dues, then send a proxy to the auction, and basically it was a round robin with the same individuals and the same vessels sitting there, and just costing us money because it was cheaper to get a friend to go and buy it at auction than it was to pay the dues. So this really has to be welcome. In fact, it's a shame it's taken this long to come through. Question: how many vessels do we have currently in the harbour that are in serious arrears and in need of falling into this process?
I'm going to ask Mr. Humber if he can answer that.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I don't know the exact number. I do know it's a very small number. When we have vessels or owners of vessels who are struggling with debt or with paying their harbour dues, we work very hard to avoid having to do this. So we work hard with them to make sure that they can pay. This is a last resort. What this does is makes that easier. It is a low number. I mean, I would be guessing at figures, but from experience, it's between 10 and 20 a year of this sort of process that we go through. The previous process, it's that sort of number. I can provide accurate figures, but this is the last resort, and we will always work to try and make sure that people can pay their harbour dues and still enjoy their vessels in the harbour.
Members, not seeing a lot of enthusiasm to discuss that one. That's been agreed. That's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. We move on to the budget monitoring report number 1. Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. I probably want to start by commending Democratic Services. This is obviously why everyone turned up this evening, so putting it towards the end of the agenda and splitting it from the other one makes sure that everybody stays to the end. So, and obviously we've talked quite a lot in recent months. I think this is the 4th or 5th time since I've become a Cabinet member where we talked about the state of the council finances. And before I go into the report itself, I just wanted to pick out some points. one of the reasons we're focusing so much on some of these small sort of changes and variations is because of the perilous position our reserves sit in. Whereas the reality is that there are small variations in budgets every year. And if you think just on a few, we've got 165,000 overspend on housing benefit, which is nothing to do with us. That's a process with DWP that I don't think anybody fully understands, but the cost sits with us. You've got variation in planning income, and we've also got over a £1 million collection fund surplus. These things happen all the time, so we can zoom in on any one of them and start to unpack them. But the reality is, with local government finance, you're constantly having changes like this. We've just been very unlucky that in the last couple of years we've had a number of major risks emerge, as well as some one-off costs and charges. So I'm hoping that this report starts to reverse some of that, and we start to see the fruits of some of the hard work, but also we get a bit of luck. So I'm presenting the Q1 budget monitoring report for 26-27, and it outlines our operational revenue outturn, capital programme delivery, and the housing revenue account. And that's a position as of the 30th of June. So the key thing to pull out is, obviously, we have continued general fund revenue pressures. So we're projecting for the year that there's going to be a £1.145 million overspend. Now, clearly, that's not a position we want to be in, and lots of hard work has gone into making sure that it's as low as that. But I do think it needs to be seen in the context of some of the gaps that we've seen in the last couple of years, and also the last two Q1 budget monitoring reports, where the variance from the budget we set in February to the Q1 report were quite large. It's still a gap, but I think when you start to drill into it, the majority of that's being delivered by something which we can all see, which is the stress and pressure being put on the waste services, and that is being addressed very much by officers. Cabinet is very much dealing with that, and a lot of hard work has gone into that. But I don't propose to sort of dig into that in this report, because it will be picked up elsewhere. But obviously that is having a massive impact on some of the finances. And again, the report sort of pulls out different costs, and again, I won't go into them. But in response to this projected overspend, I've talked in the past about the weekly spending panel that's going to veto discretionary spend, which is still in place, centralising recruitment oversight, having mandatory monthly directorate tracking around finances. These things are important, and you can see that we're starting to bear some fruit in that, and the report talks about the 269,000 in operational savings which have been identified. And we're constantly reviewing and checking the situation. Lots of hard work's going on, and there's a recommendation to have revenue environments to redirect 188 of those savings directly into cleansing services, with the remaining 81,000 held as contingency. That's from the operational savings we're making. So from a reserves perspective, we are expecting the reserves this year to hold at around 5.2 million. That's a forecast at this stage. There are lots of things that could still go wrong. There are lots of things that hopefully can still go right, but I think that's our best forecast at this stage, is that we will be able to keep the reserves held at 5.2 million, which again, after the last couple of years with some of the risks that have impacted us, I think we will be very pleased if that's our end of year budget position. But I think it's fair to say that we cannot continue to rely on one-off windfalls to cover structural operational overspends. We had the one-off pension surplus last year, and we've got the collection fund this year. We've benefited from those, but lots more work needs to happen. I won't dig more into the capital programme, because we addressed some of those issues before, but the report does talk about the slippage on the projects, as we talked about before, mainly driven by the regeneration projects and the housing delivery. And just looking specifically at the housing revenue account, we are currently saying that there will be a minus surplus of 137,000, and we're recommending a 190,000 internal environment, which is coming from savings from the Waking Watch, so that we can complete our stock condition surveys and ensure housing safety compliance. So, bit of a summary. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions from fellow Cabinet members, but again, I think we've gone through these at the last Cabinet meeting and at full council when Councillor Pugh asked the question. So Chair, I'll move the recommendations.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Bright. Now, under 20.1, I did have Councillor Pugh, but unless he's perfected invisibility, I have to assume he's not here. So we'll move to Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Scobie. It's encouraging to see that a handle is being got on some of these issues, and obviously we're nowhere near out of the woods yet, and as you've rightly said, some of these issues are things that have hit us sideways that we couldn't have predicted. But the detailed monitoring is very encouraging. I think our only concern in my group at this point is the danger of the council trying to balance its own budget in ways that may adversely affect the overall prosperity of Thanet. Not working in partnership with our town and parish councils, charging vast amounts of money for estates matters or events matters when actually the proposal is something that would help regenerate our town centres, those kinds of things. So we would like to keep a close eye on that, because I think that obviously you're perfectly right as Cabinet Member to be tying this down as much as you possibly can with the support of officers. But the bigger picture is out there, and we need to be thinking about the impact of our actions more broadly on the prosperity of Thanet. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, and I think it's a fair point, and I think one of the decisions we'll have to make when setting next year's budget is how much of the gap that we're projecting that we're going to close by making cost cuttings. And you know, that is a decision for us as councillors to decide how we want to sort of approach that. It's a decision for officers, you know, particularly Mr. Blundell's Section 151 officer, in terms of what his judgment's going to be based on the budget we're setting and what that leaves us in reserves. But I think to your point, there is a real reality that we're not going to exist in 18 months' time. And the question that I keep asking myself is, what savings can you realistically make in that time, and what knock-on impacts and unintended consequences can you have from attempting to make those savings? And I raised this at last Cabinet. I don't think you were there, but you know, the one that always sticks in my mind is, if you start a process of squeezing budgets and potentially keeping posts open and then potentially cutting into services, you then may find that some of your best people decide to leave, or projects that you thought were safe, maybe from a housing perspective where we've had major overspends in the past but are performing well. If you lose people, you're not replacing that. You may find that they're not as safe as they once were. And, you know, if we were to lose some of our best people, sure, we might make a saving somewhere on a spreadsheet, but we could equally have to employ certain posts, locum people that are much more expensive. And if we lose our best officers, the delivery of our core services are really impacted. So very, very aware of that, and completely agree with you that it's going to be one of the key points. And we will start the budget process shortly. I'll be coming to overview and scrutiny, I think, in October, to talk about the process and where we're looking at. But you've nailed the point straight down the middle, which is how much of that gap can we realistically pull in, and we will be focused on doing the right thing financially, but also reflecting that we're not going to cut services to cover some of those, because that's the most important thing that we do.
Councillor Cupp.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Scobie. This report makes clear that the financial resilience is going to be important as we go through local government reorganisation, and it currently estimates Thanet's transition costs at between £700,000 and £1.2 million over the next 20 months. We also know now that the government has confirmed £900,000 of transition funding for the new East Kent Authority. Can Councillor Scobie clarify what assumptions the Council is now making about how much of that funding will offset Thanet's own costs, and whether we are confident that any remaining costs can be met without further drawing down the Council's reserves? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Mr. Blundell here, just because I know he's much closer to this issue, and there's a couple of nuances which he'll be leading on that I think it's worth sort of bringing in. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Councillor. the question is, it's a moving target. I'm afraid it's a depends answer, and I can't give you a definitive answer at the moment. We've just appointed the strategic partner. When I say we, I mean collectively across Kent, to work through the LGR process. And there'll be a lot of work done now that the decision has been made to really firm up what those transition costs look like. So we know that we've got that 900,000 per unitary. There's also some additional funding that's been provided for adult social care capacity. So that doesn't directly affect us, but it does offset some of the additional transition costs. So the total per unitary is actually just north of £1 million, 1,050,000. We think at this time we'll probably need to put aside a few £100,000 this year and north of 500 next year. But that is really rough and ready estimate stuff. Conversations are ongoing. I meet regularly with my counterparts from across the county. We meet every 2 weeks just to discuss LGR issues, and this is obviously one of the pressing issues actually on the agenda for our meeting on Friday this week, to look at the assumptions that we've got in place, for each authority and centrally, what we think we need to spend. But I can't say definitively at this moment, but as soon as we've got an update on that, I'll be reporting that through to Cabinet.
Thank you. Members, any comments? One thing I will say in response to Councillor Austin's talk about the contribution and the costs of events and the processes around estates is, it is quite important when we're talking about budgetary discipline that we don't allow ourselves to be drawn into costs which are incurred by the community on the assumption there are no costs to this council to pick up. And we set our costs for things like estates and things like event management against the money that we have to pay out and what it costs us to run those services. And it would be lovely if we could say, whatever events you put on and whatever property transactions go on, we, the council, will subsidise that. But that's not the real world of how the budget operates. And I have to extend that really to the discussion about Piermont Depot, because you know, I see Councillor Garner, I remember your group, Councillor Austin, saying that the Cabinet should acquaint itself with the general consent order. And my response to Councillor Garner is, he should acquaint himself with our legal officers and ask them what the position is, because I don't see him doing that. I see councillors in your group and elsewhere making comments about the law which we do not believe have any validity at all. And giving away assets unlawfully is not something that we will be doing. That would not help our budgetary position. Members, it's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. We move on to the Housing Performance Report. Councillor Whitehead has provided some notes. There is much to note in this quarter's key performance indicators. In spite of a 5.4% rise in repair demand, largely driven by asset management surveys identifying previously unreported repairs, customer satisfaction still increased to 92.43%, up nearly 2% in one quarter. Quarter 4 it was 90.6%. Other notable improvements include our average days to complete non-urgent work being reduced to 11.31 days, an improvement of almost a full day in a quarter, and repairs completed in one visit increased significantly to 81.16%, a 6.3% improvement in one quarter, which reflects a reduction in complex multi-visit repairs due to better communication and regular van stock audits. The report also draws attention to the responsive repairs and void service audit, which resulted in a substantial assurance grading and no recommendations. Demand for BSW services remained stable during quarter 1, with 615 call-outs attended compared to 599 in quarter 4, with performance also remaining stable. In quarter 1, 120 damp and mould cases were recorded, a 43.9% reduction compared to quarter 4. This is consistent with seasonal trends relating to weather and domestic usage. We're performing strongly in terms of carrying out inspections and sending letters, but our performance for remedial works completed within target reduced to 67.11%, primarily due to difficulties gaining access for follow-on appointments required to rectify the underlying cause of defects. This report also notes that we're preparing for Phase 2 of AWAB's law, which is coming into force in November 2026. We will see statutory duties extending beyond damp and mould to a wider range of prescribed housing hazards. Landlord compliance remains stable across the big 6 work streams, and in terms of FRA actions, we have 125 new actions added in Q1, 149 actions completed in Q1, and 206 actions in total with overdue actions, 153. The report breaks the actions down to ensure increased transparency on actions requiring fire doors. We currently have 26 actions in relation to communal doors, 18 of which are overdue, and there are 26 actions which account for 245 door replacements in total. The main fire door contract is in place to address these, as well as many being addressed as part of the tower block project. We've also introduced 3 new dashboards to report on compliance with the Building Safety Act, which are relevant to high-risk residential buildings. We're also working on improving our reporting of antisocial behaviour and neighbour nuisance. We've done this by improving our housing management systems so that we have better records of tenant contacts and actions. This will continue to improve as our data grows. Our average void time for HRA properties has improved, and we're now reporting on TA voids. Now that we're reporting on TA voids, we'll be able to identify trends and areas to improve performance more easily. Rent arrears continue to improve as the stats show that we are below 2% for the first time since coming back in-house. We're also now reporting on our in-house TA arrears. Capital programme expenditure is where we would expect it to be for Q1 as contracts are mobilised. Our cyclical programmes are progressing well, and we've already completed our KYBR programme for this financial year. The decent homes percentage has reduced, and this is principally due to elements failing due to age. We're carrying out a data cleanse in Q2 involving desktop exercise and surveyors visiting properties to check the condition of the element failing in terms of age only. We're aware of the properties that are genuinely failing, and they are on a project plan to be completed over the next 2 years, including wooden window replacement and loft insulation top-up. Towers in Q1 progressed as we expected. Where we have stripped the cladding, we are carrying out concrete surveys so that we can complete the repairs ahead of getting approval from the Building Safety Regulator. Cabinet is asked to note the report. I move the recommendations as set out. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Keane, thank you. And speaking under 20.1, Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Sally, for the usual clear and detailed report for Q1, showing the excellent performance of the housing team in all areas. I'd just like some clarification on the work to the tower blocks. I understand that having submitted further information requested by the Building Safety Regulator, scaffolding has been erected at the tower blocks and external wall insulation removed on most of them. The removal of the old cladding is clearly prescient, but does this not leave the buildings vulnerable to damage from possible extreme weather conditions? And are the dwellings left with sufficient insulation during the period waiting for authority to erect the new cladding? Thank you.
I don't know if Mr. Sullivan can give us an answer on that, can you?
Okay, thank you for that. So in regards to damage, now that the cladding has been removed, there is scaffolding up all the way around, and you'll see that there is covers all the way around the scaffolding as well. So you see the red covering around them, and that does protect from the damage that could take place. And as we know, we are carrying out concrete repairs at the minute, which would have only become visible once we had the cladding removed. And you asked about them not having enough insulation as the winter draws in. This would be absolutely true if we go through the winter without being able to put cladding back on. There would be exposure to not having enough insulation on the building. We did deem, this was taken into consideration at the time of making the choice to remove the cladding, that the risk of having the cladding on there was greater than the risk of the thermal insulation during the winter. We are, as we have been all along, hopeful that we will get BSR approval soon so we can start making a move on replacement of the cladding. But there was always going to be a period of time, regardless of when we did it, when the cladding would be off and potential exposure to colder weather conditions.
Go on then.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. Yes, we hope very much that you'll be able to get the cladding on, but have you made provision for the situation where you can't? Thank you.
There can't be a situation where we can't. We will need to make sure that our applications are approved by the BSR, and we are working with the BSR. We've had good engagement with them recently to know exactly what we need to do to make sure that they are prepared as they should be to be able to get approval on them. So.
I think that's a good point, Councillor Bayford, which we'll obviously keep an eye on. But I know that there's more positive engagement with the BSR, and when we're hopeful that that's going to move forward. I'm sure the tenants of the tower blocks are also hopeful that it's going to move forward, because I'm sure they'd like the situation to be over. But we clearly won't leave people in a position where their buildings are not properly insulated over the winter months. Members, any comments on that? Okay, let's be moved to second. Is that agreed? Thank you. And we move to the final item, which is the corporate performance report for Q4, or Q1, actually. My document says Q4, but it's Q1. This report provides members of the Cabinet with an overview of the Council's corporate performance for Q1 for the financial year 26-27. This is a period from the 1st of April to the 30th of June. Annex 1, tables are presented setting out the latest data against each of the 5 corporate plan priorities. The Council is currently monitoring 40 corporate performance indicators. For each indicator, the expected trend or travel of direction is stated along with whether the Council is meeting that trend. Where specific targets have been set, these are provided. To support interpretation of the data, a short contextual summary has been provided against the indicators to explain the performance, particularly where performance has reduced. As of Q1, 8 indicators were either meeting or exceeding their trend or target, 12 were outside of their expected performance, and 19 are without a confirmed position, as they are either annual or biannual measures and will be reported on in future reports. In all instances, context is provided against each indicator to explain the rationale for the quarter's performance. The report will be shared and considered by the Council's Overview and Scrutiny Panel at its meeting on Tuesday, the 8th of September. Obviously, there is a mine of information there that the Scrutiny Panel can dig into as it wishes. As always, when we present this at Cabinet, we don't necessarily have the officers to comment on particular areas present. I think scrutiny is a good place to do that. But I welcome the report, and as ever, there are things that we can pick out of it and talk about in due course. So I move Cabinet notes the update provided for Q1. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Keane. There are no speakers under 20.1 because everybody wants to wait for scrutiny. Any comments, members? No, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. And that concludes the business for tonight's meeting. So I declare the meeting closed at 8:20. The live stream will now end, and I wish you an enjoyable rest of the evening and bank holiday weekend. Thank you.